Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a 10-0 run that I had live on stream to get my starting elo with a buffed Pokemon that I've seen basically no one talking about whatsoever, and that is Palossand. Palossand is a ground and ghost type Pokemon with the moveset of Astonish, Sand Tomb, and Shadow Ball. Now, it is worth noting that Runerigus has these exact same moves, the exact same typing, and about 100 more stat product. However, Runerigus is not a sandcastle, so that's the reason why I'm using Palossand. This team features Furret on the lead, Volt Switch Fortress as the safe switch, and Palossand as the closer. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. And in game number 1, unfortunately, we see a pretty big core breaker on the lead, leading Furret into Shadow Drapion. Shadow Drapion has a very good matchup against both Palossand and Furret. My plan here is just to try and soft lose this matchup and go for farm on Fortress, as Fortress energy does go very far in this meta. My opponent no-shields the Swift, I no-shield the Crunch, and my opponent actually makes a very nice catch as they save the Drapion and catch the Swift onto Florges. They could have just gone for the CMP tie with the Drapion, but by me staying in, I telegraph the fact that I'm weak in the back, so they're making the call that Drapion energy will be good. Florges lands the Chilling Water. That's never going to do much, but what it does do is give them a guaranteed attack drop. However, I'm pretty confident that even with my attack drop, that Rock Tomb should put them into 3 Volt Switch range, which should set up a perfect farm down. Ideally, I would love to try and pivot back out of this matchup because I want to try and rebait back out the Drapion if I can. My opponent is waiting down the timer. They send in Jellicent, and Jellicent is an incredibly good Pokemon for this team to see. This entire team hits Jellicent for super effective damage, so if you see it anywhere, you're probably going to be in a winning position. My opponent is forced to throw energy, and now I can bring in Palossand. If they bait with an Aqua Tail, they can make a second, but if I get a Shield Call right on the Crunch, they're just getting farmed down. And now my opponent is about to learn just how oppressive Palossand can be. Palossand has Astonish, which is an incredibly efficient fast move, and Sand Tomb, which means now I just get to boost up my Astonish damage more and more. I already have a Rock Tomb banked on the Fortress, so I can just go straight for the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball or Rock Tomb, either one is knocking out. My opponent realizes there is not a win con, so they just let the Jellicent go, and we take the game 1 win. Hopping into game number 2, and the core breakers continue, leading Furret into Hakamo-o. Hakamo-o does a great job at shutting down both my Fortress and my Furret. Ideally, I would love to try and absorb Hakamo-o energy on my Fortress, so after landing the Swift, I throw 1 Sucker Punch and get a catch and sneak onto the Fortress. This means my Fortress is going to be defense debuffed. However, I'm more than happy to trade that in exchange for a 1 Volt Switch head start. My opponent staying in to double debuff me is even better. I am very happy that they waste all their energy here. My opponent saves the Hakamo-o and sends in Licky, but the switch timers are very heavily misaligned. I'm hoping that I will be able to pivot out of this matchup. My opponent fires off energy, and if it's Shadow Ball, I am definitely not surviving. They go for the Body Slam, I survive on 1 HP, and I'm able to save a charge attack for later and bring back in the Furret. This works out very nicely, as that charge attack could potentially be game winning later on. Ideally, I just want to KO the Licky, because Licky energy is a problem for Palossand. Swift is going to land, my opponent pivots into Hakamo-o. Hakamo-o is still healthy enough that they will not get knocked out by the Swift, but Swift will get them very low, and I'm more than happy to let the Furret go and go for farm on Palossand. I think I can actually get a 2 Astonish head start, which is 20 free energy in exchange for taking basically no damage. My opponent is waiting down their timer. What do they have in the back? It's Jellicent, and this game is over. I can just go straight Sand Tomb. It doesn't matter what my opponent does. The only thing I have to keep in mind is the fact that the Licky should be 1 off of the Shadow Ball. So if they ever switch it in, then I need to go for the catch. In comes Licky, and we get the catch onto the Fortress, and that's going to seal it. We end up losing the Fortress move, but it was more valuable to get the catch, because now I get the farm down, and this poor Jellicent is going to get torn to smithereens, whether they shield the Sand Tomb or whether they don't. They decide to no shield, but now my Astonishes are at +1. I just brutally farm them down, and we get another win. We get our 3rd bad lead in a row, leading Furret into Clefable. I'm going to save switch into Fortress, and my opponent is going to respond with Altaria. On paper, this might seem like a good matchup for me. I have Volt Switch for neutral damage, Rock Tomb for super effective, but as long as your opponent has a good IV Altaria, they're always going to be able to win the 2s. So my game plan is pretty simple. I'm going to be double shielding and trying to knock them out because I need to preserve this HP to deal with the Clefable. If my opponent double shields and tries to make a play for switch, I'm going to have to re-pivot into Furret to bait back out the Clefable. So I fire off the Rock Tomb, they put up the shield, I'm going to be double shielding. I believe I can overfarm by 1 Volt Switch before firing off this Rock Tomb. I don't trust that a Sand Tomb will secure the knockout, and I need this Altaria gone. So I fire off the Rock Tomb, they no shield, and they reveal their final Pokemon in the back is Grumpig. This is very bad. Grumpig has Fighting plus Ghost coverage, which hits both of my remaining 2 Pokemon, not counting Fortress, for super effective. I pivot into the Furret, they're going to fire off a -1 Dynamic Punch, but I just need them to pivot back into the Clefable. And they do. In comes Clefable, and this is what I needed. I needed to preserve HP on the Fortress because my Fortress is still outside of Moonblast range. So even though my opponent overfarms perfectly and CMP ties me Meteor Mash to the Swift, I know that I will be able to survive their Moonblast on the Fortress. In comes Fortress, they now have exact Moonblast energy. I should barely survive this, and then I can undertap the Sand Tomb, and if they no shield, then I can go for a full Astonish down. So I fire off the Sand Tomb, opponent invests in the HP, in comes Palossand, my opponent sends in Grumpig, and they make the Shadow Ball. Oh no, I'm gonna lose this game. But wait, I'm a Palossand. We tank that Shadow Ball, farm down, and leave with the Shadow Ball loaded. Oh my goodness, Palossand put the team on his back, tanking the Shadow Ball, taking the knockout, and getting the win. We pick up the closest thing to a positive lead that we've seen so far, Furret into Azumarill. My opponent safe switches into Charjabug, and Charjabug just gets absolutely destroyed by my counter swap Palossand. Palossand is a complete wall. X-Scissor, Discharge, neither move is going to be doing any damage. My opponent's still making the effort to throw on good timing, but unfortunately, Palossand just absorbs this energy so effortlessly. I would really love to try and pivot out of this matchup after I get the knockout onto the Charjabug, and it looks like my switch timer will be up momentarily. So I pivot into Furret. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon in the back is Volt Switch Fortress, another Pokemon that just gets absolutely destroyed by Palossand. It might seem a bit of a weird play to fire off a Trailblaze at a Fortress since it's double resisted, but I just wanted to boost up my Sucker Punch damage and my Swifts. And you can immediately notice a difference, where suddenly they've lost 3/4 of their Fortress's HP bar. They fire off the Rock Tomb to put my attack back to normal, but the damage is already done. This Swift will be putting them critically low into the red HP. They're going to pivot out into Azumarill. I could just bring in the Fortress now, but I'm going to get as much value as I can out of the Palossand. I fire off the Sand Tomb. Azumarill is going to be no shielding. They're hoping for a bubble down, but Palossand is just too bulky. I'm able to make it to a second Sand Tomb. They still no shield, but now they're at -2. They've lost almost their entire health bar, and their energy is walled by the Fortress. So this is just checkmate. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Hopping into the next match, leading Furret into Empoleon. This is a pretty okay matchup for the Furret. I do have 2 matchups in the back where I think I'd probably prefer to see the Empoleon, but I definitely don't mind this on the lead because if they have an Altaria in the back, I would rather my back 2 Pokemon see the Altaria than the Furret. As long as shields are up, that is. I fire off Trailblaze, Empoleon puts up the shield, and the Empoleon is looking to overfarm. I make it to the boosted Swifts. They catch onto a Gourgeist. That is a pretty nice play from them. Unfortunately, that's going to do absolutely nothing, but what I can do is throw 4 and then pivot into the Palossand. I have to respect the Shadow Ball. My opponent throwing a Shadow Ball here would be a grave error. They do make the correct play, which is to go for the Seed Bomb. The reason why Seed Bomb is correct is because they're able to make a second Seed Bomb and inflict some pretty sizable damage, whereas if they Shadow Balled, I could have shielded once and fully farmed down. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon in the back is going to be an Astonish Ludicolo. Ludicolo will take devastating damage from Shadow Ball, so they will put up the shield. But Ludicolo kind of struggles to put damage onto Fortress. My opponent sends in Empoleon, and they are very close to the back-to-back. I should have a guaranteed win condition by just preserving HP and then pivoting into the Furret. I either get the Swift if they overfarm and knock them out, or they're forced to throw their energy, and then it just feeds energy to the Fortress. So I snipe down with the Volt Switch, and here is a very rare time where throwing on Alignment will win me the game. That's because I need to get this Rock Tomb debuff down before my opponent can land their first Weather Ball. Now that they're debuffed, 2 Weather Balls and the Astonishes are just going to miss the KO, so I'll be in a very okay spot. The nice energy advantage that they have on this Ludicolo unfortunately does not get them where they need to go once their attack has been debuffed. So now I can throw 2 Volt Switches, making sure that I'm throwing on good charge stack timing, and this Rock Tomb will be enough. Down goes Ludicolo, and the winning continues. We get the Dream lead in the next match, Furret into Jellicent. My opponent safe switches into Licky Licky, and I instantly make a pretty massive mistake. Anytime you see Jellicent lead and a neutral safe swap, you can pretty much guarantee that the third is going to be Wigglytuff. Now you may notice this team is ABA weak to Wigglytuff, as both Palossand and Furret have losing matchups. So what I should have done is just stayed in with the Furret. I could have won switch against the Licky and then had pretty good alignment for the endgame. But now I'm forced to try and cover for my mistake, and I'm forced to start shielding the Fortress, because without the Fortress, I can't beat the Wigglytuff. My opponent ends up shielding back. They're going to fire off a Shadow Ball, but they're heavily debuffed, so Shadow Ball will actually miss the knockout. I'm going to pivot into Furret, hoping to bait out the Wigglytuff. Well, it's not a Wigglytuff in the back, but it is a Pokemon that would destroy Palossand, so I'm very happy that I baited it out. Unfortunately, this is a pretty catastrophic matchup for Furret. I do have an energy advantage, but my Sucker Punches really don't go anywhere, and Mandibuzz can very consistently spam out the foul plays. I'm still going to try my best though, firing off Swift after Swift, trying to make this matchup awkward for them. I'm already at another Swift, so I will be able to get them pretty low, but the foul play is going to be putting me into the red HP. I'm very close to a move on the Fortress. I get there, but they're able to save the Mandibuzz and get the catch onto Licky. That is a pretty tragic catch for me. Very well played by my opponent. They send in the Mandibuzz. They do take the Volt Switch, and I bring in the Furret, and my opponent doesn't throw an alignment, so they will get a Snarl for free. I could not afford to go down a shield in this matchup. My opponent immediately undertaps, as they don't want to take any additional damage, and now I need Palossand to sweep. The good news is a foul play will not knock me out, so I am going to be no shielding here. My opponent, they're running Shadow Ball, and that is bad. In comes Jellicent. Palossand makes the Shadow Ball. I need this to one-shot to have any chance in this game. Shadow Ball picks up the one-hit KO. Back in comes the Mandibuzz. The Snarls are super effective. Come on, Palossand. Palossand on 1 HP. We barely hang on, make the Shadow Ball, KO the Mandibuzz, and somehow stay alive. Upping into the next match, leading Furret into Credilli. This is a slightly negative matchup for the Furret, but that's honestly pretty good for me, because what I want to try and do is leave this Credilli in range where I can get a nice Volt Switch down with the Fortress. I'm just going to be playing the zeros. My opponent doesn't ever really have a reason to shield in this matchup, and I don't think I'm going to be shielding either. But if I can leave them in Volt Switch down range for the Fortress, Fortress energy is usually pretty good into the backline of Credilli lead teams. So I fire off the Trailblaze, Trailblaze lands. It looks like I should have gone for a slight undercharge there, because I'm going to get 2 Volt Switches, but ideally I would have wanted to get 3. So I send in Fortress, get a nice farm down. My opponent sends in Talonflame, and that is bad. I pivot into the Palossand. Oh my goodness, they have Jellicent in the back, and I think I just win this game. Palossand will be able to fire off the Sand Tomb, and then just go for a double shield farm down. I'm 1 off a Rock Tomb on the Fortress, which means my opponent will never be able to shield the Shadow Ball, and the Shadow Ball is going to hit for devastating damage. I did also consider no shielding the Palossand here and Volt Switching down, but I decided that this was probably the safer play. Back in comes the Talonflame. I make sure to throw the Astonish and the Shadow Ball, and my opponent will never be able to shield here. The threat of the Rock Tomb is too much. Now I pivot into Fortress, landing the Volt Switch, and I'm not going for the Rock Tomb. I'm going for the Sand Tomb, because I just want to lower their defense. They're forced to fire off the Flame Charge on alignment. They cannot afford to take any additional damage, but because they're at -1, I can just Astonish down with the Palossand and take the win. We see a pretty spicy pick on the lead in the next match, Furret into Turtonator. Turtonator is a very uncommon pick for the Open Great League, but if you see them, there's a pretty good chance they're probably on Overheat. So I'm always going to be shielding the first move that this Turtonator throws, because I would really like to not get overheated. So I put up the shield. They do go for the overheat. That is incredible. And my opponent sends in a Azumarill. I'm going to bank a ton of energy and then send in Fortress, as Fortress will do a very good job at shutting down Azumarill. Azumarill does throw on poor charge stack timing, and they are on Hydro Pump, but even though they're on Hydro Pump and we're able to hit for quite a lot of damage, that's still a fine spot to be in as Fortress, because they just still don't hit very hard, and if they want to take the knockout, they're going to have to farm all the way back up to a Hydro Pump, and that's just too much energy. A double debuffed Ice Beam is really not going to move the needle for them. They're just going to sacrifice the Azumarill, but if they bring back in the Turtonator, I have the Sand Tomb loaded, and Sand Tomb actually does damage this season. Sand Tomb will force a Protect Shield, I can send in the Furret, and my opponent reveals their final Pokemon is a Mudslap Torterra. I don't know what a Mudslap Torterra is doing in this season. I mean, Sand Tomb was buffed, but look at the Mudslaps, man. Mudslap is a sad, sad move now. Mudslap is now Fire Spin, and you don't see a lot of Fire Spin Pokemon being used. In this moment, I see my win con. They're already in boosted Swift range, and I don't want to take any more fast move damage, so I actually fire off the Swift on alignment. This ensures that I'm guaranteed to survive an Incinerate, and now I can throw 4 and then transfer the Incinerate onto the Palossand. Palossand is guaranteed to live in Overheat. Palossand is pretty bulky, so they go for the Overheat. We survive, Astonish down, and get the win. Hopping to the final match, we've got another fire type. This time it's going to be Furret into Shadow Talonflame. Very happy to catch the Shadow Talonflame on the lead because that means that I'm not going to have to deal with it in the back on my fortress. I fire off the Swift. I think a no shield there is wise from my opponent because the only shielding scenario that I believe Talonflame wins as the Shadow is the zeros. My opponent safe switches into a Shadow Annihilate, and I have a very good response available as in comes Palossand. Palossand will fire off the Sand Tomb as soon as it gets there, and that forces a shield out of Annihilate. Even though I really want to shield the Palossand and farm down, I think that the winning play for me is going to be just to let the Palossand go and go for farm on Volt Switch Fortress. The Talonflame's low enough that even if they bring in the Talonflame, they should get knocked out by the Volt Switch before the Incinerate lands. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon in the back is Gastrodon. Man, we are seeing a lot of Mud Slappers, but the thing to watch is going to be my health bar on this fortress. Those Mud Slaps really do not do a lot. I'm just going to keep farming. They tried for a catch, they don't get the catch, and my opponent will resign the match. When I woke up today and decided to put Palossand on my team, I was not expecting to go 10-0. I was expecting to, maybe if I was lucky, have a winning record and get a starting elo, but man, 10-0 to starting elo was definitely not on my itinerary. After this run, I ended up at 2278, which I think is pretty solid considering that I've run quite a lot of different teams throughout the course of this week. But man, I think at the conclusion of this week, and it's probably recency bias playing into it, I think this was probably the most fun team that I've run. Volt Switch Fortress, after it being a thorn in my side all week, I finally gave up and ran it, and wow. I immediately understand why Volt Switch Fortress is on so many teams. It feels like an incredibly safe Pokemon to use, its energy goes everywhere, and it's just an absolute nuisance. And as a safe swap on this team, it was really able to consistently set up an advantage for the Palossand. And Palossand, it's definitely just a slightly worse Runerigus, because Runerigus has the exact same typing, it has the exact same moves, Astonish, Sand Tomb, and Shadow Ball, and I believe it has about 100 more stat product. But when in life do you get to run Palossand? So I decided, you know what? I will take the minus 100 stat product in exchange for getting to run a Sandcastle for a day. And hey, you could probably just put Runerigus with this exact moveset on this team, and it would just be strictly better. But you know what? I had fun with Palossand, and I feel like this is a very solid way to end out the Open Great League rotation. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please do help support the channel. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you to our channel members here on YouTube. The support guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.